Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the stars burn. The Dominion had come with 1,000 warships, their dark hulls blocking out the light of distant suns. After 60 years of fighting, after losing 3 and billions of her people, she knew this was the end. The system was the last line of defense. Behind her lay the remaining worlds of the galactic conquered, 12 species united against an enemy that wanted only to consume. In front of her lay death. "Admiral," her communications officer said, his voice shaking, "they are demanding our surrender. They say if we refuse, they will not take prisoners." A closed her 4 eyes slowly. They never took prisoners anyway. They saw other species as animals, useful only for labor until they died. She had watched them devour entire civilizations. She had buried friends, family, and soldiers beyond counting. "Tell them," she said quietly, "that the conquered does not surrender." Around her, the bridge crew straightened their backs. They were afraid. She could see it in their trembling hands and hear it in their rapid breathing. But they were also proud. They would die with honor. The fleet began to move forward. A gave the order to engage, and her ships rushed to meet them. Plasma fire filled the void. Ships exploded into clouds of debris and frozen air. For every vessel they destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. It was a massacre in slow motion. A gripped the railing of her command platform and refused to look away. She owed her people that much. She would watch every death, remember every name. When she joined them in the endless dark, she would carry their memories with her. Then something strange happened. A signal appeared on the edge of the system. It was old, impossibly old, using frequencies that had not been active for thousands of years. Her sensor officer stared at the display with confusion on his face. "Admiral, I am detecting an unknown transmission. It appears to be a distress beacon, but the technology does not match any conquered species. It does not match the either." "Origin?" I asked. "Unknown. The signal is coming from the outer reaches of the system, beyond the battle zone." Before she could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Brilliant flashes of light erupted in a line across the void, and ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They were unlike anything I had ever seen. The vessels were angular and harsh, covered in thick armor plates and bristling with weapons. They had no grace, no elegance. They looked like they had been built by a species that expected to be hit and wanted to survive it. "Admiral," her communications officer whispered, "they are broadcasting on all frequencies. The translation system is working on their language now." The bridge fell silent as static filled the speakers. Then a voice came through, deep and calm, speaking in words that the computer struggled to render. "This is the United Earth Defense Fleet. We heard you were in trouble. Mind if we join?" I felt her heart stop. Around her, the crew exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. Earth, Terrans, humans. Every species in the conquered knew the legends. They were stories told to children before sleep, tales passed down through generations until no one knew if they were true or merely myth. The Terrans were said to be a species from the uncharted regions of the galaxy, from a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. They were supposed to be endurance predators, creatures that did not stop, did not tire, did not give up. The stories said they had once waged wars that lasted generations, not for territory or resources but for ideas, freedom, justice, honor. They fought each other with such ferocity that they should have destroyed themselves. Instead, they grew stronger. Most scholars believe the Terrans were fiction, a myth created to inspire hope in dark times. Others said they had existed once but had vanished long ago, destroyed by their own violence or simply faded into extinction. But here they were, real, alive, and moving toward the fleet. "Admiral," her tactical officer said, his voice rising with alarm, "the unknown vessels are engaging the enemy. They are outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Watched the display as the human ships charged directly into the heart of the formation. It was insane. No species would attack with such disadvantage. They would tear them apart. The first human ship took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. The blast tore through its armor and sent debris spinning into the void. I expected the vessel to break apart, to become another tomb among the stars. Instead, the ship kept moving. Fires burned along its hull, atmosphere vented from a dozen wounds, but it kept moving. It returned fire with weapons that glowed white-hot, punching through shields like they were paper. More human ships joined the battle. They fought in ways that made no sense to us. They protected each other, taking hits meant for damaged allies. They drove forward when any sane commander would retreat. They died, and their surviving comrades fought harder. The formation, so confident moments ago, began to waver. They had never faced an enemy like this. They had conquered hundreds of species, broken the will of civilizations that had existed for millions of years. But these newcomers, these impossible creatures from myth, refused to break. Opened a channel to the human fleet. She needed to understand. "This is Admiral of the Galactic Concord. Who are you? Why have you come?" There was a pause, then a new voice answered. It belonged to a human male, older and tired but carrying an edge of something she could not identify. Later, she would learn the word for it: determination. "Admiral, my name is Cole, Fleet Admiral of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We have been watching this war for some time, and we decided we could not watch any more. They remind us of some old demons we put down back home. We do not like bullies." I struggled to process his words. "You came to fight a war that is not yours. You came to die for species you have never met." Admiral Cole laughed softly. "Admiral, in our history we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. We are not good people, not entirely, but we are trying to be, and standing by while the burn worlds is not something we can live with." On the display, another human ship exploded, but the rest kept fighting. They were retreating now, confused and frightened by an enemy they could not understand. I felt something she had not felt in 60 years of war. She felt hope. "Admiral Cole," she said slowly, "welcome to the Concord." The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, they had lost half their fleet and retreated into deep space for the first time in centuries. The Concord had survived, but barely, and everyone was talking about the humans. Admiral invited the human commanders aboard her flagship for formal talks. She needed to understand who they were and where they had come from. The legends told stories, but stories were not facts. Fleet Admiral Cole arrived with a small team of officers. I studied them carefully as they walked through the corridors of her ship. They were smaller than she expected, shorter than most conquered species, with soft skin and strange flat faces. They had only 2 eyes, which seemed limiting, and they moved with an odd grace that made them look both relaxed and ready to fight at any moment. Cole himself was old by human standards, his hair white and his face marked with lines. But his eyes were sharp and clear, and he walked with the confidence of someone who had seen much and feared little. "Admiral, he said, extending his hand in what she had learned was a human greeting. "Thank you for meeting with us." She touched her palm to his briefly. "Admiral Cole, I have many questions." "I am sure you do." He smiled, and she noticed that humans showed their teeth when they were pleased. Among that would be a threat. "Ask whatever you wish." They sat in her private chambers, surrounded by maps of the war and images of worlds that no longer existed. Ordered refreshments and waited until her staff had left before speaking. "The legends say your species destroyed itself long ago, yet here you are." Cole nodded slowly. "The legends are partly true. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. Wars, plagues, disasters of our own making, but we survived. We always survive. It is perhaps our greatest gift and our greatest curse." "How did you find us?" We have been exploring the galaxy for several centuries, Cole explained. Quietly, we wanted to understand what was out there before we made ourselves known. We watched the conquered we saw the war begin, and we debated for a long time whether to get involved. I leaned forward. What changed your mind? Cole's expression grew dark. We intercepted transmissions from a slave world. We heard what they do to their prisoners. We saw images of work camps where they starve entire populations to death. My government could not ignore it anymore. There are lines that should never be crossed, Admiral. They crossed all of them. Over the following weeks, I learned more about humans than any conquered species had ever known. She learned that they came from a small planet called Earth, third from their sun, mostly covered in water. She learned that they had a single, unlike most species that spread across multiple planets early in their development. But what fascinated her most was how they fought. The conquered received reports from a space station that they had captured months ago. A human boarding party had retaken it in just 6 hours. I watched the combat footage with a mixture of horror and amazement. The human soldiers moved through the station like predators hunting prey. They worked in small teams, covering each other, communicating with quick hand signals and short words. When they encountered warriors, they did not hesitate. They attacked with weapons and fists and whatever tools were nearby. One human, his rifle destroyed, beat it to death with a metal pipe. But then, when the fighting was over, something strange happened. The humans found wounded soldiers and began treating their injuries. They gave water to prisoners and spoke to them calmly. One human Marine knelt beside a dying and held his hand until he passed. "I do not understand," I said to Cole when she showed him the footage. "Your soldiers kill with such fury, then show mercy to their enemies. How is this possible?" Cole watched the screen with an unreadable expression. "We are not fighting them because we hate them. We are fighting because of what they do. If a surrenders, if they stop being a threat, then they are no longer our enemy. They are just a wounded person who needs help." "But you killed so many of them." "Yes," Cole agreed. "And we will kill many more before this war is over, but we will never enjoy it. The day we start enjoying it is the day we become what we are fighting against." I spent time with human soldiers in the weeks that followed. She watched them laugh and argue and share meals together. They played strange games with cards and dice. They told stories about their homes, their families, the lives they had left behind. One young soldier showed her a picture of his daughter, a tiny human with bright eyes, and explained that he was fighting so she would never have to. She also watched them mourn. After a battle that cost 17 human lives, she observed their funeral ceremony. They gathered in a cargo bay, dressed in formal uniforms, and spoke the names of the dead aloud. Each soldier shared a memory, a joke, a moment they had shared with the fallen. Then they played music, sad and beautiful, and passed around bottles of a brown liquid they called whiskey. Afterward, she found a young Marine sitting alone, tears on his face. She sat beside him and said nothing, because she did not know what words would help. "His name was Jackson," the Marine said finally. "He was my best friend. We joined up together, trained together, fought together for 5 years, and now he is gone." "I am sorry," I said. The Marine wiped his eyes and stood up. "Thank you, Admiral, but I cannot grieve forever. Jackson would want me to keep fighting. He would want me to finish what we started." He checked his weapon and walked toward the barracks. "I will see him again someday, but not today." I watched him go and finally understood something important about humans. They were not fearless. They felt fear and grief and despair just like every other species. But they had learned to carry those emotions instead of being crushed by them. They turned their pain into purpose. They had conquered the galaxy by making other species afraid. But fear did not work on humans. When you threatened what they loved, they did not run. They came for you instead. The word spread across the conquered quickly. The humans were real. They were fighting. And for the first time in centuries, they were afraid. Admiral A looked at the star maps and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the war could be won. 6 months after their arrival, the humans had become something more than allies. They had become a force that was changing the war completely. Earth formally joined the Galactic Concord in a ceremony broadcast across 1,000 worlds. Leaders from 12 species watched as Fleet Admiral Cole signed the treaty that bound humanity to their alliance. The humans promised ships, soldiers, and something they called industrial capacity. Within weeks, human factories were producing weapons and supplies faster than the Concord had ever seen. But not everyone was happy. Was a young diplomat from a species known for their wisdom and patience. She had been assigned to live aboard the human flagship, the UES Resolute, to study their culture and build understanding between species. Her elders expected her to find monsters. She was not sure what she found instead. The humans confused her. Their tactics in battle were brutal and would be considered war crimes by Concord standards. They used deception and surprise attacks. They struck civilian infrastructure to disrupt enemy supplies. They pushed forward even when retreat would save lives, accepting what they called acceptable losses. Yet they also sent hospital ships to treat wounded enemies. They airlifted food to starving populations on planets they had never visited. They rebuilt schools and water systems on liberated worlds. One human general spent his own money to bring medicine to a conquered colony suffering from plague. "How can you be so cruel and so kind at the same time?" asked Captain, the officer assigned to help her understand human culture. Laughed softly. She was a woman with dark hair and tired eyes who had fought in 3 major campaigns. "We ask ourselves that question every day. I think the answer is that we are both. We have always been both. The trick is choosing which side to show at the right moment." "But how do you choose?" "We protect the innocent and punish the guilty," said simply. "The warriors who try to kill us are enemies. The civilians who just want to live are not. We hurt the ones who deserve it and help the ones who need it." Spent weeks learning about human history. She read about their wars, their empires, their revolutions. She learned about times when humans had done terrible things to each other, things that made the look almost civilized. But she also learned about humans who had stood against that darkness, who had fought and died to make their world better. She began to understand that humans were not good or evil. They were capable of both, and they chose every day which they would be. They were learning about humans too, but their lessons were more painful. Reports came from across the front lines. Human forces pursued retreating fleets across entire star systems, refusing to let them rest or regroup. They attacked supply lines and ambushed reinforcements. They appeared where they were not expected and vanished before counterattacks could arrive. Captured soldiers spoke of nightmares. They described humans who kept fighting with wounds that would kill any other species. They told of human ships that rammed enemy vessels when their weapons were destroyed. They whispered about a human soldier who had crawled through fire, missing an arm, to rescue 3 wounded comrades. The word for human changed. It had once meant primitive or animal. Now it meant something closer to unstoppable or nightmare. Commanders began refusing to engage human forces, preferring to retreat rather than face them. One night joined the crew of the Resolute for their evening meal. She sat with ordinary soldiers, not officers, and listened to their conversation. They argued about a sport called football, each defending their favorite team with passionate anger. They shared food and jokes and complained about the quality of the coffee. A young soldier named Thomas sat beside her. He was barely 20 years old, with a face that still looked like a child. "You seem surprised," he said, noticing her expression. "I expected warriors," admitted. "You talk about games and food like you are not fighting a war that could kill you tomorrow." Thomas smiled. "If we thought about dying every moment, we would go insane. So we think about other things. We think about home. We think about the people waiting for us. We think about the small things that make life worth living. Are you not afraid? Always, Thomas said. Every time we go into battle, I am terrified, but I am more afraid of letting my friends down. I am more afraid of failing the people who are counting on us. He looked around the mess hall at his fellow soldiers. These people are my family. I would die for any of them, and they would die for me. Felt something shift inside her. She had thought humans were driven by violence or conquest or some primitive aggression. But that was not it at all. They were driven by love, a fierce and protective love for each other and for anyone they decided to protect. A week later, Admiral Cole called a meeting of all conquered leaders. He presented a plan that shocked everyone. "We cannot win this war by defending," he said. "They have more ships, more soldiers, more resources. If we stay on defense, they will wear us down eventually. We need to attack. We need to hit there." The conquered leaders reacted with horror. No one attacked the Dominion directly. Their core systems were too well defended. It would be suicide. "Suicide is what we are facing now," Cole responded calmly. "The question is whether we die slowly on defense or take the fight to them and give ourselves a chance." Admiral studied the human commander. His eyes were steady, his voice confident. He truly believed this was possible. "You are asking us to risk everything," she said. Cole nodded. "Yes, because everything is already at risk. They came to your homes and burned them. It is only fair that we visit theirs." The vote took 3 days. In the end, the conquered agreed to the offensive. They had spent centuries running and losing. Perhaps it was time to try something different. Watched the human fleet prepare for the campaign. Soldiers checked their weapons and wrote letters to families. Ships loaded supplies and ammunition. And everywhere she looked, she saw humans working together, supporting each other, preparing to fight for people they had never met. She finally understood why the legends had survived so long. It was not because humans were powerful or terrifying, though they were both. It was because they represented something the galaxy had forgotten: hope. The offensive into territory began on a cold morning aboard the flagship. Watched from the observation deck as hundreds of ships jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying soldiers into the heart of enemy space. For the first time in the war, the conquered was not running. They were attacking. The campaign was brutal from the first day. Defenses were strong, built over centuries of conquest. They fought for every system, every planet, every station. The combined fleet paid for each victory in blood. Saw things she would never forget. She watched human medics run through enemy fire to reach wounded soldiers. She saw pilots ram their damaged fighters into cruisers to protect troop transports. She heard the last radio transmission of a destroyer captain who stayed behind to hold a gap while evacuation ships escaped. His final words were simple: "Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids I am proud of them. Now get out of here." Admiral Cole led from the front, his flagship always near the heaviest fighting. He slept only a few hours each night and spent the rest studying maps, talking to officers, and visiting wounded soldiers in the medical bays. He knew the names of every ship captain and most of the Marine sergeants. His son, Lieutenant Commander David Cole, served on a frigate called the Defiant. Had met him once, a young man with his father's eyes and his mother's smile. He was brave and kind and loved by his crew. The Defiant was assigned to protect a convoy carrying supplies to the forward lines. It was supposed to be a simple mission, but they had set a trap. A dozen enemy warships appeared from hiding and attacked the convoy. The escort vessels fought desperately, but they were outnumbered. The supply ships began to fall one by one. David Cole made a choice. He ordered the Defiant to place itself between the convoy and the enemy fleet. His small frigate absorbed fire that would have destroyed the transports. It bought time for the remaining ships to escape. The Defiant was torn apart by plasma fire. There were no survivors. Was on the bridge when Admiral Cole received the news. She watched his face as he read the report. Something broke behind his eyes, a light going out that she did not think would ever return, but his voice remained steady when he spoke. "Thank you for informing me. Please ensure the crew of the Defiant receives full honors." Then he walked to his private quarters and closed the door. Found him there an hour later, sitting alone in the dark. He held a small picture in his hands, a photograph of a young boy smiling on a beach. "Admiral," she said softly, "I am sorry. I do not know what to say." Cole looked up at her. His eyes were red, but his face was calm. "There is nothing to say. David knew the risks. He chose to save those ships and those people. I am proud of him. I will always be proud of him." "How do you continue?" asked. "How do you keep fighting after losing so much?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "My people have a belief," he said finally. "We believe that the dead are not truly gone as long as we remember them. David is still with me. Every soldier we have lost is still with us. We carry them forward so they can see the end of this war. We fight so their sacrifice means something." He stood and placed the photograph carefully on his desk. "And there is something else. David would be angry if I stopped now. He would tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself and get back to work. So that is what I am going to do." The campaign continued. Worlds fell to the combined fleet. They retreated deeper into their territory, burning everything behind them. But the humans kept coming and the conquered forces followed. Then they made their final gamble. Intelligence reports revealed that the Dominion had activated a planet-killer weapon. It was an ancient device, built during a forgotten war, capable of destroying an entire world with a single shot. They were sending it to the conquered core world of, home to 30 billion people. The combined fleet raced to intercept, but they would not arrive in time. The weapon was faster, traveling through uncharted space lanes, protected by a massive escort fleet. Only one ship was close enough to reach it, the UAS Prometheus, a heavy cruiser with 3,000 crew members. Its captain was a woman named, who had served with Admiral Cole for 20 years. Captain understood what she had to do. "This is the Prometheus to all ships," she broadcast on open channels. "We are moving to intercept the planet killer. We will not be able to stop it with weapons. The only way to destroy it is to detonate our reactor core inside its firing chamber." Admiral Cole responded immediately. "Captain, there must be another way. We can find another solution." "There is no time, Admiral. The weapon will reach firing range in 40 minutes. We are the only chance." His voice was calm and steady. "It has been an honor serving with you. Please tell my crew's families that they died heroes." The Prometheus accelerated to maximum speed. The escort fleet moved to stop them, but its crew fought through, taking hit after hit, losing sections of the ship one by one. They reached the planet killer with only a skeleton crew still alive. Aimed her ship at the weapon's exposed reactor core and engaged full thrust. Watched on the fleet's sensors as the Prometheus struck the planet killer. The explosion lit up space for millions of kilometers. Both vessels were vaporized instantly. 30 billion people never knew how close they had come to death. They did not know that 3,000 humans had given their lives to save them. But the conquered knew, the galaxy knew. A conquered philosopher wrote an essay that was translated into every language in the Alliance. The words spread from world to world. The humans are not gods. They are not demons. They are simply what happens when a species refuses to accept that hope can die. They are ordinary people who do extraordinary things because they believe some things are worth dying for. They have taught us that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and fighting anyway. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship and read the casualty reports from the Prometheus. 3,000 names. 3,000 families who would never see their loved ones again. He added them to the list he carried in his heart, alongside his son and every other soldier who had fallen. Then he turned to his officers and gave the order. Set course for the, it is time to end this war. They appeared on the like a jewel of darkness. It was a massive planet, covered in cities that stretched from pole to pole, home to the rulers who had ordered the death of billions. The combined fleet had fought for 18 months to reach this place. They had crossed the entire Dominion, breaking through defenses that had stood for centuries. And now, finally, they were here. Admiral stood beside Admiral Cole on the bridge of the human flagship. Around them, officers from a dozen species worked together, coordinating the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Conquered ships flew in formation with human vessels, their differences forgotten in the face of a common purpose. "They are hailing us," the communications officer reported. Cole nodded. "Put them through." The face of the Supreme Commander appeared on the screen. He was old, his scaled skin gray with age, but his eyes burned with hatred. "Humans," he said, speaking the word like a curse, "you have brought ruin to our dominion. You have destroyed what took us 10,000 years to build." "You destroyed yourselves," Cole replied calmly. "You chose to conquer and enslave and murder. We just made sure you paid the price." The Supreme Commander leaned forward. "We will offer surrender, but only to you, only to the humans. We will not kneel before the lesser species of the conquered." Silence fell over the bridge, a felt anger rising in her chest, but she controlled it. She wanted to hear how Cole would respond. The human admiral stood slowly. His face was tired, marked by months of war and the weight of countless losses, but his voice was strong. "There are no lesser species," Cole said. "There are only those who have not proven themselves yet. The conquered stood against you when they could have run. They fought beside us when they could have hidden. They died alongside our soldiers on 100 battlefields. They are our equals in every way that matters." He paused and let his words sink in. "You will surrender to all of us, or you will surrender to history. Those are your only options." The Supreme Commander stared at him for a long moment. Then something strange happened. His shoulders slumped, and the fire in his eyes died. "Very well," he said quietly. "The Dominion surrenders. The war is over." The transmission ended. For a moment, no one moved. Then cheering erupted across the bridge. Officers embraced each other, tears streaming down faces of every species. I felt something wet on her own cheeks and realized she was crying too. Cole did not celebrate. He stood at the window, looking out at the enemy world, his expression distant. Approached him carefully. "Admiral, you won. It is over." "The war is over," Cole agreed. "But the work is just beginning. We need to rebuild what they destroyed. We need to help the species they enslaved find their way again. We need to make sure this never happens again." "You sound tired." Cole smiled slightly. "I am tired. I have been tired for a very long time, but tired is not the same as defeated. We rest when the job is done." The following months were filled with negotiations and treaties. The Dominion was dismantled, its territories divided among the species they had conquered. War criminals were tried and punished. Slaves were freed and helped to return home. The humans played a crucial role in the reconstruction. They sent engineers to rebuild cities and teachers to establish schools. They shared technology and medicine and knowledge. But they also did something unexpected. They went home. Not all of them, but most. The human fleet reduced its presence in conquered space, returning soldiers to Earth and their families. When I asked Admiral Cole about this, he laughed. "We did not come here to rule," he said. "We came to help. Now that the help is done, we go back to our lives. Our soldiers have families waiting for them. They have missed too much already." "But you could stay," oppressed. "You could have power, influence, territory. After everything you did, the conquered would give you whatever you asked." Cole shook his head. "That is not who we are. We are not conquerors. We are just people who saw something wrong and tried to fix it. The best thing we can do now is step back and let the galaxy build its own future." Years passed. The Galactic Concord grew stronger, guided by the lessons they had learned during the war. The species that had once been enemies became partners. Trade and culture flowed between worlds that had never spoken before. And the legend of the humans grew. On Prime, an old woman sat with her granddaughter in a garden full of flowers. The child had been asking questions about the war, about the mysterious species that had appeared from nowhere and changed everything. The old woman was, her hair now silver, her eyes still bright with memory. She smiled at the little girl and began to speak. The legends said they were monsters or gods or ghosts, she said. The stories made them sound like something beyond understanding, but I knew them. I lived with them. I watched them fight and laugh and cry. What were they really like? The child asked. Thought for a moment. They were just people. That was the most surprising thing. They were ordinary people who decided that giving up was not an option. They were afraid and tired and sometimes angry, but they kept going anyway. They believed that every life mattered, even the lives of strangers they would never meet. And somehow, that was enough. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, an old man sat in a garden of his own. Around him were flowers and trees, and a gentle wind carrying the smell of growing things. Cole looked at the wall of names before him. His son was there, along with thousands of others who had not come home. He visited this place every week, rain or shine, to remember. A small child tugged at his sleeve. She was his great-granddaughter, curious and full of questions. Great-grandpa, did we really save the galaxy? Cole looked down at her, then up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear in the evening light. He thought about the soldiers who had given everything, about the species they had helped, about the future that was still being written. No, he said finally, we just reminded them it was worth saving. The child nodded seriously, not fully understanding but accepting his words. She ran off to play, leaving him alone with his memories. Cole watched her go, and for the first time in many years, he smiled. The war was over. The dead were at peace. And somewhere out in the galaxy, trillions of people were living lives that would never have existed without the sacrifice of ordinary humans who had refused to look away. The legend was complete, but the story continued. And that, Cole thought, was exactly how it should be.